On today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, Jonathan Alexander of the Houston Chronicle joins the show to talk about his takeaways from the OC search and any necessary changes for the better in 2025.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, welcome to today's episode. You have three credential media members here on the Locked On Texans podcast to talk Texans. I'm John Hickman. That's Big Sarge. Of course, we're joined by Jonathan M. Alexander, and the M stands for more insiders, more Texans talk, and more of everything over with the Houston Chronicles. Hey, man, off the top of the dome, thank y'all for making us the first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers over at FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Today's episode, we'll be looking at, should the AFC scare you? Should the Houston Texans be scared of the trajectory of the AFC altogether? And with Jonathan Alexander, we'll look at any necessary changes he believes the Houston Texans need to make to have a better 2025 season. But we open up today's episode looking at just the takeaways for the offensive coordinator search. Jonathan, thank you for stopping by.
Thanks, Jonathan.
What's up, fellas, man? This has been a long time coming. I've been waiting for y'all to have me on, but I appreciate you. I appreciate y'all calling me.
We're glad to get you on, man. We wish you would have had that haircut like we talked about in the pregame. But to the offensive coordinator search, you know, Houston had a lot of different candidates, some good, some people like, some fan favorites, but overall ultimately landed on Nick Kayley. What's your overall thoughts on landing on Nick Kayley and just the search altogether?
No, I thought it spoke to, the fact that I thought Nick Caserio probably had some influence in it. I don't think he kind of overtook D'Amico Ryans, but Nick Kayley was obviously a guy that Nick Caserio was familiar with, having worked with him in New England. He also interviewed for the same job in 2023. So, I thought that gave him a little bit of a leg up in the process because the Texans were familiar with him. Nick Kayley obviously wanted to work here based on the reports that he turned down jobs for the Jets, to be the Jets OC. But, what I found out was that, they liked him in particular because he was a position coach, and particularly a tight ends coach who has his hand in both the running game and the passing game. I think that's what really stood out for them. They like that fact, and they want to improve the passing game, and they want to improve the running game, and they want to build an offense around CJ that they believe he can flourish in. And CJ has been vocal about he likes, Sean McVay's offense, and having spoken to a lot of people who covered Nick Kayley, Nick Kayley was responsible for a lot of the concepts this past year in Sean McVay's offense. And they had pretty good success. They didn't have a huge amount of success this past year, but I think from talking to a lot of people, they believe he's a smart individual and a guy who, it is a challenge being that he's a first-time play caller, but they know he's smart and they know he has what it takes to get it done. And we'll just have to see if that turns out to be true.
Yeah, but Jonathan, with that being said, Bobby was smart. Bobby, analytics. Bobby also knows both sides of the ball now. He knew the defense side of the ball, and it was his first time calling plays on the offensive side of the ball for the last 2 years. When you look at the offensive coordinator search and you bring in a guy like Nick Kayley, and you look at, like you said, you look at his background with the New England Patriots, you look at his background with the Los Angeles Rams. I understand, being in the room. I understand coaching the position. I understand, maybe picking the brain or throwing in some things to Sean McVay. But what should the Houston Texans offense look like, especially from another first-year play caller? And the reason why I'm asking you that is because Gerard Johnson, who is a positions coach, who has a great rapport with CJ Stroud, he didn't get the opportunity to get the job. They gave the job to Nick Kayley, and I understand what they're trying to do But what should we expect from a Nick Kayley led offense that we haven't seen before?
I think right now, and we've talked about this kind of off air, I think it's hard to know exactly what to expect from Nick Kayley because he's never called plays. He doesn't have a set playbook. Now, you could assume that he's going to run some version of the West Coast offense because that was the offense that he was in the past 2 years with the Rams. And you would assume that he would take on some version of that, similar to how Bobby Slowick did when he came from San Francisco. So we can only assume because he hasn't spoken publicly. He hasn't spoken publicly yet. So, and what better mind? I mean, Sean McVay is considered one of the best minds in the NFL right now. I think Kayley would be foolish not to have some concepts and some parts of his scheme that he took from there and bring it here because it has been a successful offense. So I think it's still uncertain. We don't know what it's going to look like. We can only assume that it'll look like some version of what the Rams offense looks like with a little bit of his own spin to it.
Yeah, and John, before you go, I got one follow-up. Jonathan, do you think that the clock is – this is what I think. Let me tell you what I think first. I think the clock is already ticking on Nick Kayley because you've had a first-year offensive coordinator already here with the Houston Texans, and I feel like he's made all the mistakes and the excuses that another first-year play caller is going to make. So I feel like the clock is ticking, and he has to be successful in his first – really within his midway through the season, and at least by the first season. I don't think the Houston Texans can afford to go 2 years and then they reach the same pinnacle that they did with Bobby Slowick, especially when it's time to, make all these changes when CJ's coming off his, rookie contract, when Will's coming off his rookie contract. It's going to be time to pay some other guys. So do you feel like, that once Nick Kayley actually gets to Houston and gets started, that the clock is ticking on him to be successful?
I don't know if I would describe it as the clock is ticking because, a lot of things could happen in the first season. Having said that, like say if he was a bomb, I wouldn't be surprised if DeMeco Ryans fired him after 1 year if he bombed. You see that commonly around the league. The Eagles, they fired both of their coordinators after the 2024 season or 2023 season, and then it led to them, getting the Super Bowl. So if he were to struggle completely and, the players didn't have any faith in him, I could easily see DeMeco moving on, but I don't really know what's going to happen. I think, given that this is his first time calling plays, it leaves that uncertainty there. But I mean, I don't think DeMeco or Nick would have hired him if they didn't think that he could have some type of success, if he didn't show them some type of plan that would give them faith to say, let's go for it. Because they got a lot of great candidates that they interviewed.
I wanted to ask you about that too when we come back before we look at necessary changes. I just want to say I'm kind of tired of the word scheme. I'm sick of everybody. Look at the scheme. The scheme matters, but coaching matters more. And I say that because Bobby Slowick came from a great scheme at the time, a bulletproof scheme. And the scheme came over here to Houston, and it looked well in year one. Year two came around, and injuries played a reason why it fell apart. Offensive line woes played a reason why it fell apart. But overall, coaching is what we ultimately believe held this team back. I think even with the offensive line woes and even if the injuries, if we would have saw a better version of Bobby Slowick against Detroit, against a lot of those second half games where the defense didn't have to bail him out, then he'd be back for his third year. And we'll be looking at this offense going into year three with DeMeco and CJ and Bobby all on the same page. And so I just want to lay to rest the word scheme for a while. Just 1 week, at least until we hear from Nick Kayley, and hopefully that press conference is coming soon. When we come back, Jonathan, I want to ask you about who your favorite candidate was and were you disappointed they didn't get a chance to eventually come to Houston, and any changes you believe need to be made for a better 2025 season for the Houston Texans. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there is no better place to stay in the game than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, I'm looking at Jason Tatum for more than 29 points. The best part, Prize Picks is quick and easy. You can set up your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and they're fast and secure with their withdrawals. So you don't got to wait around for your money. You can get it as little as 15 minutes. Plus, I love the weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get a discounted player projections for even better value. So here's how you take advantage of it. Download the app and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On NFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Yeah, Nick Kayley got hired. Sorry, I know why you're laughing. Nick Kayley got hired. He'll be the Houston Texans offensive coordinator moving forward. But, Jonathan, did you have a preference of any of those guys, or Brian Johnson, or Jeff Nixon, any guy that came in and you thought, man, maybe he would have been able to get the most out of this Texan roster, how it's currently put together?
Well, let me address the last point, but because I think it's a good point that you made. You can run – the scheme is a scheme. Like, you can run a good scheme, but that alone won't bring you success. Like, I think one of the things, obviously, with Bobby Slowick was the fact that he wasn't able to adjust when other people adjusted to his scheme. Like, he wasn't able to make adjustments specifically in the second half of games. Other people's had counters. Teams used a lot of too high safety on them, and Bobby had some adjustment for it, but not enough. And I thought that was a big reason why DeMeco ultimately fired him. And then also you have to have your players, they have to have a lot of faith in you, and they have to trust that what you're calling and what you're teaching them is right. And you got to have buy-in. I was at the Super Bowl for like a day and then had to come back. But I asked a couple of Eagles players, like, what's the difference when you go from like one coordinator to another year after year, because they've been through it. And he was just saying, you got to have buy-in. Like, players have to believe. And they felt like players really believed in Vic Fangio for the Eagles. And I don't think that everybody believed in what Bobby Slowick was teaching his second year.
You don't think?
I don't. I mean, I'm being a little bit kind, but just having I don't get the sense that people really bought in completely.
I'll say it. They didn't. Not everybody.
Yeah.
I'll say it, John.
Yeah. So I think that played a part in why they struggled. But as far as favorite candidates, I don't know that I had a favorite candidate. I was familiar with a couple. Like, I covered Jeff Nixon when he was with the Panthers, and
Carolina,
and he was a running backs coach, and then called plays after they fired Joe Brady for like 6 games. So I know Jeff Nixon is smart and capable because he did an admirable job with an offense that was missing like a lot of his best players without a quarterback, and he had them looking serviceable after Joe Brady had flopped his second year. And that wasn't even his offense. And then he goes to Syracuse and leads them to the number one offense. So I thought what he could have done probably would have done well, but you just don't know. It was a different scheme than what the Texans had run previously. It would have been different for C.J. Stroud. I don't know what a spread offense would totally look like in the NFL. So I think that's probably part of the thinking DeMeco was thinking as well. But I did like Gerard Johnson just because of his familiarity with CJ, and I know he comes from Kevin O'Connell tree, so he's had a lot of smart mentors. But ultimately, DeMeco didn't feel like he was the right guy for the job, and I think part of the CJ struggles were probably tied to Gerard.
So, Jonathan, with that being said, and I know that I asked this, and I got to ask this again. When you look at Nick Kayley, and if he doesn't work, is that an indictment on DeMeco, or is that where does the blame lie if Nick Kayley is not successful?
Yeah, it's got to be a blame on DeMeco because he's the one who ultimately hires, the coaching staff. if your coaching staff fails, then that is on you. And I think D'Amico would probably say the same as well. But right now is the Texans' job to get the offense everything they need to be successful. So they need to have the right pieces. They can't.
We talked about that too, Sarge, with him on the show. Yeah,
they can't rely. I think Kenyon Green did an admirable job getting in shape and getting prepared. But the fact that the Texans didn't have a backup plan for him just in case it didn't work out, to me was a huge indictment on them. And I think they can't be caught flat-footed again this year as they head into this offseason.
So I want to follow up on that by asking you about Nick Caserio's job this year. Not saying his job is in jeopardy. That's not where I'm going. But the coach is here in the building. You elect to bring back Cole Popovich instead of assistant offensive line coach. You elevated him to full-time head offensive line coach. Mixed reviews and mixed feelings with that, but the chemistry is there between the OC now and Cole Popovich, and they also have a relationship back to their New England days. With bringing back some guys in certain areas and coaching staffs and the players, how much now lies on Nick Caserio in the next 2 months to either A, rework some of these contract deals so you can expand your salary cap, and B, go out there and raise the floor of some of the weaker rooms on this team. The wide receiver room, the offensive line room, maybe
tight end.
Maybe revamping that tight end unit. Nick Kayley, former tight end coach, does he feel like he can get the best out of rookie Case over Brevin Jordan coming back and Dalton Schultz? Just how much do we now have to look at Nick Caserio and say half of the job is done? And it's always like that. But making a major change in year 2, you got to go get the players to fit the scheme of the new OC.
Scheme.
Yeah, I think it's.
I'm sorry.
I think it's the most important thing for Nick Caserio. Like this time period is where the GM, make their money. Whether they draft well or whether they make the right deals to get good enough players to fit your roster. So he's going to have to do some. They don't have a ton of cap room. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head.
I think it's like $6 million right now. So
yeah,
it ain't a lot of money.
Yeah, they're going to have to cut some deals with guys, potentially extend players to free up room, restructure some deals. They may even have to cut some people that you wouldn't think were going to be cut to free up room. I don't know if it'll get to that, but they may have to. But he's going to have to, make some tough decisions this offseason. And then he's going to have to draft well. The track record with offensive linemen hasn't been great recently. No, it ain't the best. And, I know he's changed scouting staffs in the past few years. So, maybe, this new staff or some of the new guys will have a better idea of how offensive linemen will project in the future. But he's going to have to land. I don't think he's in jeopardy. Like if he misses this year, that he'd be in jeopardy of being fired this year. But, they'll start asking questions if things don't go well. If they don't find the right pieces to be successful, if they don't take a leap, then there will be, questions being asked and more of a hot seat.
Jonathan, I'm going to need you to put your general manager hat on for a second. I'm going to make you general manager of the Houston Texans right now, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry it doesn't come with a salary. It only comes with the title for the Locked On Texas 2 minutes. Locked On Texas purposes. Jonathan, do you going into the draft, right? If you're the general manager, are you drafting for scheme or are you drafting for a need? I had to, John.
Great. I know, and hopefully it's the last time. That's a great question, by the way. Today, do you prioritize talent or do you prioritize filling what you absolutely need? I'm glad you asked him that question because that's a necessary change for a better 25.
I think I'm always of the belief that you always draft talent. Having said that, you don't reach like 10 spots if a guy is not there. Now, if you really need somebody, like the Texans really need a guard, like if they can't get somebody in free agency and the guard that they want isn't in that, they're at 25 now, 25. Isn't in 23 to 29 range, then maybe you trade back and get a guard. But I think they have to leave the first round getting a guard. Like that is what they absolutely have. I know that the Texans feel that they have to get a guard and a defensive tackle and probably a wide receiver. But I think you have to leave the first round getting a guard, and there are options out there. Tyler Booker, Alabama, depending on where he goes. I've seen him as high as 10, but as low as 25.
Yeah.
Donovan Jackson for Ohio State. I've seen him as high as 23 and as low as the second round. I doubt he'll reach the second round, but they have options there. There are some other guys I can't think of off the top of my head. But you definitely want to draft for talent. And the good thing for them is there are some good guards that will be there at 25. But you don't ever want to reach. I would never reach.
Well, Jonathan, I was just going to say this real quick, Jonathan. Jonathan, when we have you back, I'm going to have to debate you on that because I feel like they need a wide receiver too more than they need a guard right now.
Well, who's going to play guard?
I mean, if you got the OC that is off the tree of Sean McVay, we've seen Sean McVay do more with less, so make it work.
I would never.
Sarge is still holding on to Kenyon Green panning out, man.
I would never take that chance. I would not take that chance. I definitely wouldn't take the chance on Kenyon, and I might take the chance on Shaq if I've seen he looks like a different person.
Shaq who?
Shaq
O'Neal.
If he looks like he's a different person, then maybe.
But Jonathan, wait, hold on. So you don't want, so you say, so Kenyon Green, who was a 2-time All-American, if you say that he hasn't panned out to be what they wanted him to be, so you're going to put a rookie guard to protect CJ?
Yeah, over Kenyon.
If it comes down to Tyler Booker, 10 times out of 10, I would roll with Booker. J.A., before we get you up out of here, man, necessary changes for a better 2025. I'm not sure how deep you are right now in the free agent class, but, I mean, we all know this Texans wide receiver room has a legit number one. You have question marks around Stephon Diggs. We all presume, at least I do, Tank Dell won't be back for next year due to his injury. Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie haven't panned out where we want to see them pan out. They have a very low ceiling or even lower floor. Is there a player out there in free agency that you believe makes sense for the Houston Texans?
One player, I don't know, but because I don't know where the Texans will be salary cap wise, how much they're willing to spend on these guys. I really don't think that they'll, really go big in free agency. I think where they secure their roster is in the draft. Having said that, like I really believe that they need to get a guard because I think your offensive line is way more important. I think teams are showing that your offensive line is more important than who because you can have weapons, but if you don't have guys protecting you, then you can't throw to those weapons. And I think the evidence was there, last night in the Super Bowl. As far as like one free agent, I know who are some guards that are free agents. I can't.
Well, not necessarily guards, but just bringing in somebody to boost that wide receiver room. And there are some cheap options out there, like Elijah Moore will be a free agent. Rondell Moore would be a free agent. Tutu Atwell will be a free agent.
Chris Godwin coming off that ankle injury is going to be a free agent.
Will be a free agency. So there's some options out there that I think Houston will be able to score for the low.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I think receiver isn't a hard position to hit on necessarily. Like if you find like a hungry guy who's trying to earn that contract, like as long as he's not like a bad dude, I don't think finding a receiver in free agency is going to be difficult.
Was that a Deontay Johnson shot or?
See, and Deontay isn't even a bad guy, but he just couldn't get out his own way. And I had people telling me that when the Texans signed him, he just can't get out his own way. So like you can't sign somebody like Deontay Johnson because that's a risk you take. No, I agree that they're going to have to get a wide receiver, but it's just not my priority over guard. Like, I think you have to leave this offseason getting a wide receiver, but they first need to get a guard first. And I think they'll prioritize it by getting guard, defensive tackle, wide receiver. That's how.
So, yeah, we got to bring you back on to talk more for the Houston Texans offseason. Thank you for stopping by. When we come back, should the Texans be scared of the AFC? We dive into that and more on today's show. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on fourth quarter comebacks. You can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel. The feature allows for me to stay into the action, make every moment more exciting. And whenever I'm looking like I want to back my favorite team, I got a late game rally or I'm picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance because FanDuel allows me to get in on the action when the action is popping. Plus, the app is super easy to use, to navigate, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com to join today for your shot for $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we dive into should we be scared of the AFC, right now, Sarge, you said something, and that is, maybe this is the offseason the Texans need to go all in.
Yeah.
I feel like that was last offseason, and it was derailed by bad play calling on the offensive side of the ball. Joe Mixon, Danielle Hunter, Azeez outside, trading for Stephon Diggs. Injuries hurt this team as well, but they did some very good things in free agency. Look at the draft that they had as well. Still don't know how Kamara Lassiter didn't get an all-rookie nod, but I feel like that's what they did last year, and maybe they rushed it a little bit. Not mad at the decisions that they made because it panned out for them in the end, to a certain extent, of course. But it feels like this offseason is more about being smarter with your moves and smarter with the guys and decisions you make.
Why not?
They are strapped for cash.
But why not? Listen, why not do it again? It didn't work out for you, all right? So I get it, but like, why not do it again? Go all in again. Like at some point, going all in is going to have to, have to be the mantra. And I get last season, and injuries did hurt them a lot. And if there are certain moves that has to be made, then I understand that. But John, you're talking about a team. You're talking about a team in the AFC that if they don't watch out, Cincinnati's going to leap them, move forward past them. We already know what Buffalo can do. We already know what Kansas City can do. We already know what what the Ravens, what Baltimore can do, right? And we've seen another year. You may be looking at the Chargers being able to get it all together, and they come up. We don't know what the Denver Broncos are going to do. Like you're at that. You were one of the top 4 teams in the AFC the last 2 seasons. Everybody else is going to make moves in order to get better. Everybody else is going to make moves to try to get to where the Kansas City Chiefs are, because sooner or later, John, and I don't think that a lot of people looked at it this way, but when I watched that Super Bowl, John, when I watched that Super Bowl between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs, I knew instantly from the first 2 series, I was like, oh, this thing is over. This is over. And this isn't a game where the Kansas City Chiefs are going to hang around, and they're not going to hang around. And then all of a sudden you look up and they're within 1 score and they kick a field goal to win the game. That's not going to happen, because the Eagles came in with a purpose. The Eagles put they foot on their necks, and they kept their foot on the gas.
BTA.
Yeah, right. When some people thought that they were going to let off, next thing you know, Jalen Hurts is throwing a bomb to Devonta Smith. And so, John, we're looking at, I'm going to be honest with you. I think that we're looking at the decline of the Kansas City Chiefs. And I want to see who's going to be able to step up, because we've talked about this on the show before, John. At some point, dynasties expire. It did for the San Francisco 49ers. It did for the Dallas Cowboys. It did for the New England Patriots. And now it looks like it's time to transition coming off of the Kansas City. And we need to look and see who's going to step up. And you don't want to be the Texans and just get satisfied winning the AFC South and making it to the divisional round. No, you've got to move forward, and you got to do whatever's necessary to move forward.
So are you scared of where the Houston Texans are right now currently? Strapped for cash, don't have a lot of money in free agency. Now, the presumed thought is, hey, they're going to be able to work with some of these guys and open up some money by restructuring some deals and, being able to get some more salary cap. But are you scared how this team is currently put together, considering, once again, the first-year play caller, Cole Popovich stepping in, the expectation with him now being here in Houston? You said that they love him a little bit more in the locker room than they did Chris Strausser. Is it a little fear there that, hey, maybe Houston ain't going to be ready to compete in 2025, in 2025 with the Cincinnati coming back? With a Chiefs team that still will be looking for a vengeance, Baltimore ready to get it done, Buffalo, how it ended for their season. So, I think Houston is in a scary place right now.
Houston should look. Teams should go into every season in fear. They should. You should. Look, when I say every offseason, you should go in with the fear that if we don't get better, we're going to be behind. And so now you operate in that. Hey, look, I need to make sure that every year I'm putting the best product on the field, right? And with the Houston Texans, we've seen what this team looked like in the down years. We need to see what they're going to look like, especially in this window of these rookie contracts, because one, Derek Stingley's going to get a bag. Pretty soon, you're going to have to pay CJ. Pretty soon, you're going to have to pay Will. And if Nico continues on the trajectory that he's on, you're going to have to pay him too. So you need to operate right now. And if it doesn't work when it's time to pay those, then maybe you could scale it back. But when you look at a team like the Philadelphia Eagles and what they were able to do, I mean, Jalen Hurts is on a big contract. A.J. Brown is on a big contract. Smith is on a big contract. Saquon Barkley got a big contract too, right? I mean, especially for a running back.
What do you got, 15 this year?
I don't remember. But, I mean, and John, you may know this a little bit better than me. With the way that their offensive line is set up, they're going to lose one or two offensive linemen as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So, I think for Houston, man, you got to, for one, you got to play it smart. You went all in monetarily last year. You did great in the draft. You got to try to repeat that same success from the draft, right? You play it smart. You look at all of your important positions. Of course, you're not going to have to worry about quarterback because you're not going to replace the quarterback. Derek Stingley is going to get his money. Kamari Lassiter is already on a rookie deal. Nico Collins is already on a very affordable deal. Not my phone bill. I'm sorry. But you look at some of the guys and say, we need to, at certain positions, maybe find the next guy, right? You look at this running back class, great running back class. Go find your running back. Wide receiver class isn't great, but you could possibly find a receiver that's good enough to be maybe what Nico is right now moving forward. You got to make sure that the depth is not be as top heavy, and make sure your depth is ironclad. Yeah. I think Houston is in a good spot right now to do that. But again, it's all about being smart with your scouting, being smart with your positions and who you value, and the guys that you absolutely need to bring in, because you can't miss out on that talent.
And real quickly, John, before we end, real quickly, the one thing I will say is I do believe that Nick Caserio can go back to his New England Patriots roots and watch what Bill Belichick was able to do with less.
Yeah, get some guys in the later round that make sense to come in and do what you absolutely need for them to do. Thank y'all for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Sarge Sports with a Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.
Sorry, Miss Jackson.
Ooh.